First draft for the Vietnam War was held on December 1st, 1969, with a countrywide audience over radio and television. There were 366 plastic capsules in the glass container, each containing a birth date of the year. The sequence of birth dates drawn determined the order in which men ages 18 to 26 would be called to serve in the military. Another 26 capsules held the letters of the alphabet to determine the order for each date. West from North Carolina, 1969, draft number 210. Every man with a letter from his own doctor was granted an individual audience behind closed doors with somebody I barely glimpsed. An army doctor, I assumed. I couldn't tell how many of that group were being deferred from service. I figured that 2 years in the military, at least away from the front lines, would be an experience that would never come again. At the physical, however, I started to wonder if the front lines might be where I was headed. One of the guys in the group, who from his talk was very gung-ho about going to fight, got dropped because his glasses were just too thick. Most everyone I knew was able to avoid the draft if they wanted to, so I personally knew very few who went, and only two whose names are etched on the wall. Then as now, draft army or all volunteer, America drew its troops almost exclusively from the blue-collar and poorer neighborhoods.
The Vietnam War was the first war to integrate black and white troops. The draft prompted many problems for young black males because they were woefully underrepresented in draft boards. Though they made up 13% of the population, only 1% was represented in the draft. Though this seems like a lucky occurrence, many black men were angry as they were eager to serve and fight for their country. Many, eager to serve, volunteered when they found out that they would not be drafted. When troops actually got into Vietnam, many noted that black soldiers initially received unfair treatment. But as combat months increased, the division between races began to diminish. Many black soldiers were very influential and played an invaluable part in the war. One exceptionally honorable man, Private James Anderson, Jr., received the Congressional Medal of Honor after being drafted only a short while earlier. He exemplified his courage when he used his own body to shield his platoon from a grenade. He saved his entire platoon, both black and white, from almost assured death. In total, 20 drafted black soldiers received the Congressional Medal of Honor for their service in Vietnam. Black soldiers showed the highest combat re-enlistment rates of any race.
As the war dragged on, its popularity diminished rapidly, and as a result, draft evasion became prominent. Throughout the course of the war, 16 million men evaded the draft. They did this through a variety of ways, either through luck, which involved receiving high lottery numbers and thus having a lower chance of being drafted, legal ways, which involved working within the system to evade the draft, and illegal ways, which involved more drafting. Within the legal system, draftees applied for various deferments and exemptions. Occupational deferments were offered to men working in the fields of science, medicine, and engineering. Education deferments were offered to those enrolled in university, although the Selective Service restricted this option through imposing the Selective Service Qualifying Test. This test further narrowed the pool of college students eligible for deferment. In addition, no postgraduates were allowed to apply. Hardship deferments were also offered for those who needed to take care of dependent family members. As a result, many young men invited disabled family members to live with them so that they could apply for this deferment. Physical deferments were offered to those who were mentally or physically disabled. To make themselves eligible, many young men sought letters of exemption from family physicians or psychiatrists. Some even resorted to purposefully injuring themselves. Those who felt that their enlistment was imminent chose the National Guard as an escape route. This option involved less dangerous domestic tasks. However, a majority of those who enrolled in the National Guard held college degrees, and this option was typically not available to the underprivileged. A common theme was that the privileged classes were more well informed about the requirements for draft deferments, and were therefore more likely to obtain them. Many organizations, such as the Central Committee for Conscientious Objectors, arose to aid those who wished to escape the draft legally. This organization provided legal counseling for conscientious objectors, those who were opposed to the war based on religious reasons. They trained more than 3,000 military lawyers for this purpose. In addition, they made information about the requirements for conscientious objection available to all enlistees. The Supreme Court case United States v. Seeger in 1965 made the option of conscientious objection more viable by opening it to all individuals who were opposed to the war based on ethical reasons, not just to those who cited religion. One prominent figure who evaded the draft was Muhammad Ali. He declared conscientious objection for religious reasons and refused to be inducted.
I ain't draft dodging, I ain't burning no flag, and I ain't running to Canada. I'm staying right here. You want to send me to jail? Fine, you go right ahead. I've been in jail for 400 years. I could be there for 4 or 5 more. But I ain't going no 10,000 miles to help murder and kill other poor people. If I want to die, I'll die right here, right now, fighting you. If I want to die, you my enemy. Not no Chinese, no Viet Cong, no Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. Want me to go somewhere and fight for you? You won't even stand up for me right here in America. For my rights and my religious beliefs. You won't even stand up for me right here at home.
The WBA took away his World Heavyweight Champion title and boxing license. A Houston court found him guilty of violating the Selective Service Act, and he was sentenced to 5 years in jail and a $10,000 fine. However, he appealed and stayed out of jail. Those who could not escape the draft through a series of deferments resorted to legal methods. They signed "We Won't Go" petitions, they returned draft inductions to local boards, and they burned their draft cards. In addition, many broke into draft board offices and destroyed government records. Throughout the course of the war, approximately 210,000 Americans were charged with draft-related crimes. Non-registration was also another way to evade the draft. Primarily used by poor in the inner cities, these men skipped registration and spent the rest of the war living underground. 50,000 men became political fugitives by fleeing to other countries throughout the course of the war. The most popular destinations were Canada and Sweden. Mounting draft resistance spurred many public activists to arise. One of these men was William Coffin. He played an active role in the national Stop the Draft Week. On October 20th, he and others delivered 1,000 draft cards to the Justice Department, which refused the cards.
Though women were not entered into the draft during the Vietnam War, they are very much involved in the war and the war effort. In the Vietnam War, for the first time, women had the opportunity to not only serve as nurses overseas, but also as American soldiers in separate units from men. However, they did not go through rigorous training, and generals usually stationed the units in safe spots because they thought that women did not have a place in the war besides the hospitals. Most women did serve as nurses in the Red Cross during the Vietnam War, and it is estimated that in total, the women who served as soldiers and as nurses during the war numbered anywhere between 33,000 and 55,000. These numbers do not represent the efforts on the home front, as women worked in factories, took care of their families, and supported their men overseas. Women also had a large part in protesting the war, and many served as war correspondents. The legacy of the enormous effort women contributed to the Vietnam War is commemorated today by the Vietnam Women's Memorial in Washington, D.C.